Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now there was a time when the mighty HDD sat at the centre of even the most expensive gaming PC builds. We all remember the gentle hum of a 7200 RPM hard drive, a mechanical chorus that accompanied any and all gaming sessions. These days I'd recommend a solid state drive for even the most entry level PC builds. We've looked at how a couple of games run on a hard drive over the past year, Starfield and Cyberpunk to be precise. In today's one however I've transferred even more titles to this old Seagate Barracuda to see what it's like playing modern games on an aging storage solution. This thing has seen 11,950 hours of use since its manufacture in 2011, which is a lot lower than I expected and is reportedly in good health. Not bad for £3.50. Let's remind ourselves of the past HDD based endeavours first of all. Okay, so let's have a bit of a recap. The games we tested before were Starfield and Cyberpunk earlier in the year. Now the biggest problem with using an HDD in 2024 is going to be the loading times. This took a good few minutes to actually load into the game, and in Starfield, a game with loads of loading screens, yeah, that's going to feel even more problematic. The other thing is the consistency of the gameplay. See there, look, just like sharp movements when the assets and backgrounds load in. There may be a few problems. I've left the frame time graph up on screen because this will highlight problems with the game. As you can see, it's an absolute stutter fest here. This game also has some issues with voice delay as well. If you're talking to certain NPCs, the audio will load either before or after their mouth has stopped moving. I think I've broken it. I've broken the game. The cheesesteak has broken the game. Yeah, so this is the Starfield experience.
I'm happy to serve you.
Okay, so for Cyberpunk, what I will say right off the bat is that the loading time was pretty quick. It only took about a minute from loading our game to actually getting into the game here. The game is running pretty smoothly. You'd be forgiven for thinking that this is still actually installed on an SSD. At this point in time, I'm not convinced I haven't forgotten to swap it over to my hard drive here. You might start to see missing textures on roads and things. It looks like, however, that isn't happening today. The game seems to be running fairly well. This does have an HDD mode, of course, maybe that's helping things here. Last time I played this, we had whole road textures missing. It was not exactly a solid experience. Alright, so I've seen some pretty weird things happening with Alan Wake 2 in other posts, like some Reddit posts. Some NPCs look pretty odd. I did notice that the sound sort of desyncs a little bit in certain sequences, like it might carry over from a cutscene. Let's go and zoom in on some of these NPCs, see if their faces have... Oh, whoa. I don't know if you noticed that, but she had like a triangle head. It just sort of loaded in at the last minute. If I zoom in on him right in the background, you'll see again that he's sort of made up of triangles. Oh, he's still like it as we get closer. My goodness, sir, what has happened to your face? That's better. That's creepier than the actual game. Okay, so for Baldur's Gate 3, I'm walking on thin air here. Yeah, for this one, it is going to take a while for the assets to load in. This is another one that requires an SSD according to the minimum specs. It did take a while to load, not an overly long time. I'm going to say about a minute and a half to load my most recent save game. As you can see though, I think it could have done with a bit longer. Now, the grass textures have turned into individual squares. The environments are half missing. The map has just popped in, or at least some of the map assets have. Now, a lot of the time you may be playing like this from a more sort of top-down perspective. Oh, there's supposed to be tracks there. Didn't know that. So if you're playing from this sort of top-down perspective, you may not notice some of the missing textures around you. You know what, I think it's fine now that everything's loaded in. I'm sure there are going to be some battles, you know, that cause some stutter, maybe some more missing textures as we move from one area of the game to the other. Not as bad as I was expecting after everything decided to finally pop in. When it came to CS2, there were a few issues at the loading screen. It took a couple of seconds for the background to load in and for the mouse to sort of become responsive in the graphics menu, but aside from that, when we were in the actual game, everything seemed to run fine. I played a few team deathmatch games across different maps and there were no real issues to report. This could be because it's all contained within sort of smaller maps, everything loads in at the start. The aim of this video wasn't to sort of slander HDDs and say look how bad they are for gaming, it was more to just see what it was like and hopefully point out that not all games are going to perform really bad. This one doesn't actually suggest an SSD either, so the developers knew that it would run fine on a hard drive, I guess. So here we are in Spider-Man Remastered. This doesn't actually recommend an SSD up until you get to those recommended or very high minimum requirements. At the minimum end, where it recommends the hardware you need to run it at like 720p and 30 FPS, it does state a 75 gig HDD is fine. I thought this would be more problematic, to be honest, because we're moving so fast throughout the city. I thought there'd be a lot more pop-in, a lot more missing textures. I just saw a couple of shelters down there pop in last minute. Let's get a sort of higher viewpoint and see if we can see anything missing. Yeah, I mean, look, nothing really to complain about here. Now, The Last of Us Part 1 also suggests or recommends an SSD for gameplay, but to be honest, there's not really much loading here. There is a long initial loading screen at the beginning after the game has sort of built the shaders, which is more of a CPU intensive process and takes the most time. But after that, the game is sort of one long continuous experience aside from cutscenes which do break up the action. There may be moments when you might notice some slowdown in terms of those loading, but there were no in-game issues as you can see here, and the performance was pretty consistent. Now overall, when it comes to gaming on an HDD in 2024, just like it was before, it's going to depend on the game, of course. With SSDs cheaper, then I'm not going to say than they've ever been, because if anything, I've noticed the price start to go up over the past few months, but it's definitely worth investing in one as part of any modern gaming PC build, that's for sure. They're still fine for storage and stuff like that, and some games are going to run if you are on a really tight budget. You know, you pick up an old PC with a hard drive still inside. It's going to depend on the age of the drive, of course, but I think it's been interesting to see that not all of the games have done as bad as I initially anticipated. But let me know your thoughts down below. And are there any games out there that you've tried to run on a hard drive that run really bad? Let me know down below in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.